thank you so much for doing this today. I'm grateful to speak to you. As we started connecting, I was doing sketches on top of the illustrations my illustrator's done for me for the draft of my second book. And we were just discussing that that's something you're quite familiar with.
Yeah, but mine are boring. So like the illustrations were like, this is how a trust distribution works. And this is how your superannuation gets paid. And this is what a franking credit is. Like mine were never like sexy or exciting. Mine were always really boring. And then I'd be disappointed.
I've got to tell you though, as someone who relates to numbers differently, I guess, I can understand numbers, but I relate to them very differently. It truly wasn't until I met an accountant who took me seriously when I said, no, you're going to need to get different colored pens and a big piece of paper and use shapes and arrows, please.
But also that's me as a financial advisor. And I think that might be playing into my success. Like loves a spreadsheet, but also only if it's color coded.
When we bought this house, like I was in conniptions as to when I saw the numbers of the, you know, what we needed to service, what you're signing up for, you know, we can get into this, the psychology of what your experiences might have been when you were young and how that affects your relationship to money when you're older. And it wasn't until Audrey sat in bed literally with crayons and an A3 sketch pad that we nicked off G after she'd gone to bed, and she drew it all out and showed me that there was space between what we were earning and the mortgage that we were going to be paying.
You know how many times, so I own a mortgage broking business, and do you know how many times we have to do that with clients? Like they'll come in and like, don't get me wrong, we never want to max out your capacity if you're not comfortable with it, but they'll come in and be like, oh, V, we think we want to like borrow 700 grand. And you go, well, in Melbourne and even in Sydney, that's going to get you not that much given you're buying in a city. You're actually servicing like 1.5 mil. What if we look at like 900? And like they're really stressed about it. They're like, we can't afford it. And I'm like, let me just do the maths. And they're like, wow, how did you do that? Actually, it's just maths.
Yes. And showing them their current rental going, right now you can do it.
Yeah, like right now you're actually already doing it. In fact, you're saving and paying more rent than you are on that mortgage. And I can actually fix that up for you. That does take a lot of pressure off.
In your experience, having, you know, sat down with people who probably have very similar goals, I want to have financial security, for my immediate short term, and, you know, financial security for my long term, and, you know, something for my kids if they come along. Everyone's got a very similar goal, but the very different approaches they have to numbers and the concept of risk. Have you noticed something that is common between those who are able to handle the numbers and those who, like me, who need pictures?
I think it's just our different brains and the way that we have been hardwired to learn, right? Like we've got creative people, and then we've got analytic people, and there are people that sit in the middle of that. And I would say that that's me. Like I have this, and I'm very grateful for the ability to understand numbers deeply. Like I did, you know, before I even got into finance, I did psychology, and I was doing, you know, statistics and like analysis, and like was really into that. But on the flip side, I also need a really good pie chart to understand what things look like. Like I love, you know, having it drawn out for me. In fact, way back in, you remember high school, way back when we would like study for exams. I was the girl with all of those like notes stuck up on the wall that were color coded because that was the only way that I got it. So it was like, I have this love for analytics, but I also need the visuals so that it makes sense. Like I'm not the type of person, and I'm sure that you aren't either, because I don't think creatives are, like we're the type of people that go, yeah, but why? Yeah, but why?
Yeah.
And that can be really frustrating because they go, the answer's X, Osha. And then you go, yeah, but I'm going to need to understand the background and how you got there and what that looks like before I accept this answer.
Yeah. And I need an answer that isn't because it's on the test, because that was what I would get.
Yeah, and that's what we used to get, right? So for us, being that creative mind, I think so many times you're like, yeah, but why? Like you've been told before a million times, it's important to take superannuation into consideration. But until it's like fully contextualized and drawn out, you're not going to make it a priority because you're like, nobody explained the why. Catcher, like I'm just not interested.
It is really important. I'm sure things are changing now when it comes to financial literacy in schools, but you can only work with what you've got. And like, again, I didn't understand that my inability to cope and my own lack of financial literacy and my own inability to understand what the numbers were doing had led to me inadvertently putting myself in relationships of a disadvantage when it came to financial professionals. And my wife, Audrey, I took her along to meet one of these people once, and she just looked straight at this person and went, "No, we're changing now."
But that's so common, especially in the media space, right? Like, I'm very lucky that way back when I was a financial advisor, I'm now a retired financial advisor. Because of my podcast, I started attracting lots of people who were also in the media. So like influencers, people on telly, like radio personalities, and I'd become their financial advisors. And I would hit the roof a number of times a week because I would say, management fees that were being taken out and you were being taken advantage of. And the amount of people that would come to me from this one particular person who was their accountant, and I would be like, okay, you're coming from this person. I would have to literally clean house because they'd been taken advantage of. And like, it's like anything, right? Your mate uses them, so then you use them and you go, oh, they're a bit weird, but like maybe maths people are weird. Like,
well, when you're in whether in the entertainment space or not, the susceptibility we have of getting taken advantage of if we, and not making great decisions for our goals is really, really high if we don't have our head screwed on around financial literacy.
And you deserve that as well. Like everybody does, irrespective of whether you're in the media and doing entertainment or you are just a mum who's working as a nurse. Like, there are always people out there trying to take advantage of your situation to make their back pockets more deeply lined. And it frustrates me so much because that's the one space that it's like, really, we're going to take advantage of people when they have come to you with this like unlimited amount of trust?
Because, we know we've got to do something. We know we're not great at it. So we're trusting someone who's got all of the letters after their name and all the plaques on the wall and that they will act with integrity. But I've had to, and Victoria, I'm sure you've had the same thing with the people you've worked with, is like, ultimately, I'm the person that hired them.
Yeah, but you don't know what you don't know. You can't say,
that's right.
oh, that's, a faux pas on my behalf, because you probably did your due diligence in exactly the way I would tell you to, right? Did you look them up online? Yes. Did you, ask a mate who has been with them? Yeah, my mate's been using them for a couple of years and like I haven't heard any complaints. Oh, I need an accountant or I need an advisor or I need, someone, a manager, whatever it is. And it's just, if you don't know, you don't know. And you and I both know that half the time you find out someone's dodgy, there's nothing online about it. Like you just go, oh, so we all should be leaving? Oh, okay, no worries.
Yeah, just a little late. But also when it comes to things like, I don't know, your power bill, your home loan.
Oh, I can sort you out on that. Like if you're getting screwed on that, like that's unacceptable.
Yeah, and that's the really interesting thing, understanding how people in other countries who don't necessarily have the mortgage calculators and this sort of stuff that we have access to here on the Smart Money website, the government website, because they're not on the bank websites, just how much they're getting taken advantage of because they simply don't understand how compound interest works. Which, is compound interest like that's the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do of financial literacy?
So no, and I think that there's this overwhelming assumption that it will be easy for you to understand compound interest. Like I am wildly passionate about normalizing the fact that we don't understand this before we start talking about it. So like the way compound interest is, or the way compound interest works is it's the money that our money makes when we invest money, right? And that sounds pretty complicated at the same time as being quite simple. But the hard part is it's not linear. So it's not 1 + 1 = 2 and then next year 2 + 2 = 4. It's 1 + 1 = 1.10. And then it's 2.2, and it just increases and it's kind of like a stepped thing. So in the first few years, it doesn't really have an impact, but over the long term, it does. And for us as human beings, we have by default a way of linear thinking. Like we don't think in the way that compound interest is portrayed. So even if I explain it to you once, you kind of go, that's not interesting to me, or that's not something I understand. And that's where I have to work and work and work again at it. Because for me, base level financial literacy is understanding how much money is going into your account, how much is coming out, how much do I need going in to be able to cover all of my expenses, what do I owe, and what do I own? Like, I want you to know those 4 numbers. So earn, spend, own, and owe are my 4 favorite ones. We can then build on that later and talk about compound interest, and we can talk about investing, we can talk about superannuation and how tax effective that is. We don't need to assume that people automatically know what investing is, because otherwise we'd all be retiring really rich, Osha, and we're not. So that's telling me a lot about how we just don't still know. The fact that we are still, as a country, so reliant on a pension when we retire tells me I'm not doing my job well enough.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I like those 4 numbers. And I just got a flashback to the first time I visited a dietitian in my late 20s. I was like, this is very similar to calories in, calories out. What do I want to end up as when I'm 50? Yeah, it's very similar.
Bodybuilders, but with this, you get rich. And I know mine's better. I can sell it way better.
I mean, it's not my line. I think it's Chris Rock's line. He talks about, I don't want to be rich, I want to be wealthy. It's Shaq is rich. The guy that signs Shaq's check, that's wealth.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's where those managers are trying to take advantage, though. So do we really want to be wealthy, or do we want to be rich?
Yeah, but mate, at this point, I just want to be okay, to be honest.
I got you. We can work on that. We can work on that.
You've had a very big change in your life earlier this year.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I had a baby, which is very fun.
It is. We have 2. We have one who's 20 and one who's 5. And it is, as it keeps going, fun. And then it's, well, how do I put this? You can't have the joy of parenting without, oh my God, parenting. Both happen. You can't not have one without the other.
100%. It's literally the best. Why didn't anybody tell me?
It is everything. So I do want to ask you, as someone who, now as a financial advisor, as someone with this, super successful podcast, and you would definitely understand that many people, I did it myself, don't want to have kids just yet. I don't feel like I'm financially ready. Now you've, seen what can happen and how slippery a slope it can be when you go into baby Bunnings. What would you say about the idea that, what level of financial readiness do you think in Australia you might realistically need to have versus what people might think they need to have?
I think people assume when they're having kids that they need hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think that in 2024, we are all consumed. And I got caught up in this as well with all the stuff that you need. Osha, you're going to need the snoo. You're going to need this fancy baby carrier. You have to get the Rolls Royce of prams. What are you going to do? Give birth in the public system? Absolutely not. You've got to give birth in the private system. We are so lucky in Australia. Our public system is elite. Technically, here in Australia, you can have a baby for $0. That doesn't mean that you want $0 to have a baby. If we're able to plan, having a healthy emergency fund is really helpful. But I think we also should be taking a bit of a step back and going, we don't need all this stuff. I think that I got swept up in that. So I was the mum. I did buy the snoo, Osha. I have a very fancy pram. But as time goes on and, Harvey is now nearly 9 months old, I look at it and I go, you just need somewhere safe and warm for them to sleep. You need a source of food for them and some nappies and we'll be all good. I think we need to take the pressure off and then focus on us. So it's not what the baby needs, it's what we need. So what are you doing with work? Have you thought about your superannuation? Have you thought about, an emergency fund? What does an emergency look like to you? If you've got a really big mortgage, maybe you need a really, really healthy emergency fund. But if you don't and you're renting and maybe there's nothing in your life that you're like, oh, V, I wouldn't need that much. It can be different because 3 months worth of expenses is what I recommend for an emergency fund. And then if you're planning on a baby, bump it up a little bit more. But I think that today we get fed a lot of these are things you absolutely need, when in reality, that's not the truth. But I think that we also need to be making sure that we're not pouring from an empty cup. Just make sure you're financially okay before you buy the fancy baby outfits.
Talk about getting financial gain out of vulnerable people.
Oh, it's actually cooked.
The linen shirted Instagram shop scenario is just, oh my goodness me. Though I will say this, the snoo that we got for Wolfie, we did a gig for them. And so but our snoo, I think it's now had 9 kids through it in 5 years.
We've done the same. My snoo is already off. I've set her free. Yeah. She's with one of my other girlfriends. And, after Christmas, she's going to another. Like it's the sisterhood of the traveling snoo.
It really is. And the amount of unbelievable stuff you can pick up on Gumtree for not a lot at all is incredible.
Like, it's a place
the
to
$1,600 wooden Swedish design cot. I stood there in Baby Bunnings and went, hang on a minute. There's one for $400 in Linfield. Gone in the car. Got it.
How did the person having that picked up by you go, oh, Osher's in my driveway?
It was Linfield. They didn't know who I was. It was fine. And thank you for being open about how much money we think we might need to have a child, because it is definitely one of those things that stops people from pulling the goalie, so to speak. But look, honestly, you just figure it out. Like everything, you figure it out.
Exactly. And
once you got the stakes, once the stakes are high, you're like, well, the kid needs to eat. All right, we'll sort it out.
And it doesn't have to be that complicated. I think that nowadays there's like 6 million parenting books, and we're all trying to do the right thing, right? Like, I want to be the best mum that I absolutely can be, but I promise you it's not a parenting book that's going to teach you that. Like, it's not the snoo. Don't get me wrong. I have a very committed relationship with my snoo, but that is definitely a privilege. It's not something that I needed. Oh, yeah. And if I couldn't afford the snoo and I didn't get it, my baby would have been absolutely fine. So would have we. It's just one of those luxury purchases that I was very lucky to be able to afford. But I think we need to go back to seeing these things as luxury purchases. Like, there seems to be this underlying idea that that's an expectation. Now, you actually need to have these things. You don't need them, but does it make your life a little bit easier? Absolutely it does, but it's not an essential.
As someone who studies psychology, I'm kind of interested to notice, that it's well and truly, shown that your experience in the first 5-10 years of your life, without you actually going back in there and doing some work on it, can shape a lot of your choices, your subconscious choices, and have you in places that are either good or not great for you. And you maybe sometimes can't figure out why, because you're just simply repeating the behavior that was modeled to you by your family of origin. But that can happen as well with finances. Sometimes with psychology, it's very difficult to kind of break down people's reaction to threat or intimacy or stuff like that. As someone who's worked in this space for a long time, do you find it tricky sometimes to rewire people's brains around money and scarcity and fear of not having enough, or spending like it's never going to stop?
100%. And I think it's important here to note that money is inherently emotional. Like, money is inherently tied to how you value things, your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, your behaviors. Like, my background is also in psychology. I was silly enough to do 2 psych degrees before realizing I actually wanted to be a financial advisor. So I have a really nice tech set still. But the more that I get into this space, the more I realize I don't really use my finance degrees as much as I use my psychology degrees. So your money story, to me, is the most important thing for you to understand. So how you think about money, how you feel about it, like, where did those things come from? Because you're right, they can be really subconscious, but your money story starts becoming concrete from the age of 7. And these money stories are things that you tell yourself or things that you believe that might be true or might not be true, but it might be why, you go to brunch, right? And you go for the cheapest thing on the menu, and you're actually fine financially. Like, babes, you can afford the eggs Benny, but you never get it. You always just get, some toast with some eggs on it, because in your head, that's the cheap option. But we've never really thought about why we make that decision. Or maybe you find it really icky when you're out at dinner with a couple of friends and they go, oh, I really want to split it evenly. And you go, oh my God, but I only want to pay for my section, or vice versa. And you're like, oh, well, why is she so stingy? Why is Victoria want to split it by what she ate instead of just splitting it evenly, which is easier for everyone? Like, all of these things come from your money story and how you grew up around money. So whether you grew up super wealthy or you grew up where money was really scarce, that is going to shape how you feel about it. And like, I've got people in my community, and so many of them are having a hard time with money because of the way that they grew up around it. So like, I was recently talking to somebody who grew up super wealthy, like super wealthy. Everything was given to her basically on a golden platter. And now she's in so much credit card debt because she just kept up with that spending cycle when she moved out of home, and it never hurt. So like, she was never anxious about a credit card because she'd seen mum and dad use credit cards her entire life without any negative repercussions. So when she became an adult and got her credit cards, she was like, oh, that one stopped working. I'm just going to get a new one. That's fine. And now she's so much debt. But you can see how that might happen. And it's only on reflection where we go, babe, how have you gotten here? And it's not judgment from me. It's like, let's work it out, because I can get you out of that situation, but only you can keep yourself out of that situation. If I fix all of this and then you go along and spending isn't painful, do you know where you're going to end up? Back in debt. So I think we need to understand that. And even just asking yourself questions like, what's your first memory about money? Like, what do you remember? And like, for me, oh my gosh, I remember really being worried about taking the excursion form out of my school bag when we were in grade 3, because like, you know, I'd hear mum and dad talking about money, and it had been sitting in the bottom of my school bag for a while, but it was due the next day. And I think I needed like some cash or something for it. And I remember just being so anxious to bring it up with mum and dad because I'd heard them talking about money the week before, and that just didn't feel like a thing I should do. It felt a bit icky. And then you know what happened, Osha? I got in trouble from my mum because she was like, Victoria, why didn't you give us this earlier, rah, rah. But the reality is, it sat in the bottom of my bag because I didn't know how to have that conversation. And it's only in reflection that I go, oh my gosh, that's one of those like defining points around money, isn't it?
Like even the parents of your mate who ended up in a lot of trouble, you know, you work really hard, good for you. You created a big business, you've scaled, you can provide your daughter with everything. No parent wants to put an adult out in the world that is going to be vulnerable to any kind of problems, you know, emotional, financial or whatever, but here she is. So when do we start talking to our kids about money, about work, about the value of saving or, you know, being careful how we spend?
I think that's where my answer is always, but it has to be age appropriate. So you're not going to sit your 6-year-old down and be like, okay, so mummy earns $100,000 and daddy earns $80,000 and this is how much the mortgage is. It's always about starting small. So like if you're in the supermarket and your kid's like, I want these muesli bars. Okay, well maybe we need to be having budget conversations. And before we get to the supermarket, go, okay, this week we've got a budget of $20 for snacks. So it's your job to find the snacks you want that fit in the budget. And maybe they want the bougie muesli bars. I don't know why, Osha, but like why are muesli bars $12 now? You can have one box of these and some fruit, or you could get like the home brand version and you could get a couple of different snack options and they fit in. So I think it's about talking to your kids about age appropriate money topics, but also getting them involved. So like if people are talking about stuff and it's just in passing, that doesn't mean you're going to absorb it, but get them involved in the decision making. So whether that's the groceries or maybe it's about, okay, one night a week, we're going to try and, you know, do dinner for $15. Like, how do we do that? You'll have the kids online looking up recipes and working out what they can cook and then probably being shocked that red meat's not an option for that meal. And then I think that teaches them a lot about how things are going to come to fruition. If you're going on a family holiday, we don't have to tell them the whole budget, but like, okay, kids, what is our spending every day going to look like? We have to, you know, do an extra budget because we're going to be eating out. Like kids love control. Kids love being given the reins. Kids adore this. And there are so many ways that you can get kids involved that don't involve going, okay, cool, mummy earns X and daddy earns Y. And I think so many times we assume that to talk about money, we have to get real deep real quick, and we don't.
we managed to get G. We changed schools when she was in grade 8. And we were really lucky about that because it served her very, very well. But we were able to send her to the school. We lived in an apartment at the time, and she made new friends and such, and she would go to someone's. She came home one day, 12, 13 years old. How come we don't have a lift in our house? And she wasn't being, she wasn't being punished. She was just being really honest.
She was just wondering.
She was just wondering. And I'm like, well, we're both immigrants, and, both your grandma and grandpa were immigrants, and, that sort of people often arrive with not a lot or nothing. And what we have is what we've built in that time. But people like, for example, who live in that part of the city of Sydney, I don't know, maybe their mum or dad has been, that's the 17th house in that suburb their family's owned. Time, what was that great line? Time in the market beats timing the market.
100%.
The amount of time that your family has had as exposure to either the workforce or, the marketplace or the property market or the real estate or the stock market, whatever, that will beat a really great idea or a really great business idea every time.
Which is really annoying for us, Osher. Like, we've got to make it ourselves, but it turns out that even working our butts off isn't getting lifts in our houses.
That's okay. I'll never forget her face, though, when she started first working retail and she saw the pay slip and she knew how much money she made an hour, but when she saw how much the PAYG got taken out, the look on her face, and, me and her mum and her grandparents, she was like, we're like, yep, that's
Welcome
tax.
to the real
and she's
world,
like, look at
baby.
us like, make it stop. It's like, sorry, kid.
You're sorry that like $12 an hour actually becomes far less.
It is tricky. But seeing her work ethic now, seeing the way that she saves money now is one of the great joys of my life. It's kind of uncommon, though, in her cohort of people that work that hard. And I'm wondering if you noticed a bit of that throughout the contact with the people that listen to your podcast and the contact with people that read your books, that there's a kind of difference in approach to work ethic and approach to risk in this country when it comes to age.
There absolutely is. And I don't want to say it's a generational thing. I think it's actually a technology and a living in 2024 thing. Historically, delayed gratification was something that we all had to experience, right? It was, you couldn't just immediately jump online and see your friends, or, if you wanted to go to a bar, you couldn't pick up the phone and be like, hey, mate, are you around the corner? Like, let's grab a drink. Like, it took so much more energy. And I think now, when I could order something online, Osher, and it could arrive this afternoon, we just want everything right now instead of waiting and building. And I think that there seems to be this idea that it will be given to us. I mean, we've all seen 6 million influencers online where you're like, they're the same age as me. How do they have all of this stuff? And instead of working hard and seeing work ethic, you get resentful. And I think that there needs to be a mindset shift around what hard work looks like and honestly what reality looks like. Like, Osher, it is not normal to buy a new dress every single time you go out on the weekend. Like, that is a terrible financial decision, and most normal people aren't buying a new outfit. In fact, the average Australian, and this is probably me going off on a tangent, the average Australian spends $250 a year on clothing. Like, what? I can't say that I relate to that. And I know that that's showing immense privilege. But I think so many of us go, oh, we have to keep up with the next trend and with fast fashion and with everything going on. That has filtered into this idea that we should have had it now, and why bother if it's going to take 10 plus years to work up to it. And I think that, yeah, there is definitely an issue with work ethic. There is definitely an issue with people wanting instant gratification instead of delayed gratification and working hard for it. But I also think that it's harder to see that in 2024 than it was from your dad who went to work every day, or your mum who went to work every day.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so much more prevalent these days that people just have it all and seem to have it immediately.
There was a time when credit cards first showed up as far as day-to-day goes, I remember. And the idea of memorizing 16 digits was crazy, all right? And so there was a trick that people used to talk about. It's like, oh, no, simple. You just put your credit card inside a, takeaway container full of water, put it in your freezer. So when you want to use it, there's no electronic thing. You actually had to take it down and run it through a machine. So you had to wait hours if not days, to get this thing. So you could run it through the machine. It had a little, carbon copy thing on it. How does one work on delaying gratification in this time of autofills and, your phone remembers all your numbers and everything like that? We only have to remember 3 numbers on the back of the card. That's it. So how do we work on delaying that gratification?
I just do Apple Pay every time because, Osha, I can't be bothered remembering those 3 numbers. So often if the website's not taking Apple Pay, I didn't buy it. So I'm more of a do as I say, not as I do finance expert. But I think that that's important because it's so important to go back to basics. So for me, I am consistently telling my community, you can have it, but can we put 24 hours between you and your spending? So, Osha, if you want it, great. Let's not buy it today. I'm not saying no, because I think that so many times people are like, no, because that feels like I'm missing out. Let's just pop a note in your phone, and if you still want it tomorrow, we can go back to it. And I can guarantee 9 times out of 10, you're like, that was an impulse purchase. I don't need that. But it's a nice way of not restricting yourself, because often money feels restrictive, right? And if I say, don't buy it, don't be impulsive, Osha, at my core, I am an impulsive human being. But you know what I can do? I can wait 24 hours. And that often puts things in a little bit of perspective. And so that helps. I think it's also about talking about the real world. Like, what is normal? I have just started a new, I don't want to call it a column, but like, I guess a research project. I've realized and I've known how big my community is, but I've realized that with a big community means statistically significant results, Osha. So like I've started doing a heap of my own research, and we've called it Asking for a Friend, because there's so many money conversations and things that I want to know about people, because I can go on the Finder website and see what the average credit card debt for all Australians is. But like, I want to know more details about what that is. Like, what are we using our credit cards for? How do we think? How do we feel about money? And a lot of us don't actually know what reality looks like, because we are all trying to keep up, or we're spending money, Osha, we don't have to keep up with people who are already in debt. And we just go, that's dumb. That's so dumb. Like, you are throwing so much money away to keep up with people who are already up to their eyeballs in debt. And like, debt is invisible. You can't see it. But you know what you can see? Nice shoes, nice clothes, a beautiful car. You can see a lift in a house. But you can't see the crippling anxiety that they might feel making that mortgage repayment. You can't.
What's that great line? I spent my time buying things I couldn't afford with money I didn't have to impress people I didn't know.
Exactly. And I just think going back to basics and going like, what do we actually need? And what are the key components of my happiness? What does my money story look like? Like, what actually sparks joy? And those things are different for everybody. So like on my show, I've got Beck, and she's a co-host of mine. And she is like the most wholesome human being you've ever met. If I said, Beck, you've got a whole day to yourself, like, what do you want to do? She's like, I think I might like go lay in the grass. Like, okay, Beck, have fun. I'm like, I'm going to get a massage. I'm going to do this. I'm going to, like, my perfect day, if I had it to myself, involves spending money. Beck's perfect day is staring at the clouds. And I adore that. But I think that that's such a good example of like, we all want different things. So can we put some blinkers on and stop looking at all these idiots that are spending money that they don't have either and going, Osha, do I actually want to buy a house, or do I just feel this pressure because everyone is saying that they are purchasing homes and I feel like I'm being left behind? Like, run your own race. Like, let's have a look at what you actually need.
What's the goal that I value? That it would be a sense of financial security when I'm older. Is buying a house the only pathway? Possibly not. There might be other pathways to that.
Absolutely not. Like, there are so many pathways.
Yeah, at a lower risk as well. Okay, let's explore that. There's more than one way. And you know, as you mentioned, we don't know what we don't know. You've written a very busy person. You've got a new child, and you've written a new book. I don't know how you got the deadline done.
Oh, I cried a lot, Osha, if we're being brutally honest.
I'll bet.
If we're being brutally honest, it was a lot. I had to like hand in that manuscript when my son was 6 weeks old. Like, do you know what? Can't even remember what I wrote, but I was humbled when I did the audiobook.
I'll bet. Like, I'm going to see my dentist this week because I've been writing nonstop for the last 8 weeks. I'm like, I'm grinding my teeth in the day now. Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, that's not great.
I only wear the mouth guard at night, but what the fuck is happening here? So yeah, I know what you're talking about. But the book is called The Business Bible. It's about whatever passion that you have, and then trying to find a way to turn that into a revenue stream, a full-time
100%.
gig. And you mentioned earlier, we see the success stories. We see Mia Freedman famously let go from big broadcast job, sat down at her kitchen table and created an empire. Naomi Simpson with Red Balloon. So Mia Freedman started Mamma Mia, Naomi Simpson with Red Balloon, very similar. What's a job I can do with these little kids? And then Red Balloon, it's just a monster. There's many, many things like that. What's the line between going, oh, I want to look for that, I want to go for something like that, and then starting and going, how come I'm not that yet? Like, where's the line between having an inspiration and then not getting down to yourself because now I haven't built an empire?
But also, you've got to remember that you're comparing your beginning to somebody else's middle or ending of their journey, right? Like, if you look at Naomi Simpson, she's incredible. But I'm going to go, like, if I wanted to start a new business, I'd be silly if I went to her website and compared myself to that. Like, let's go back and go, well, where did she come from? What does that look like? And I get this a lot because I have a successful podcast. I have a beautiful mortgage broking business. I'm so proud of everything that I've done. But I started, Osher, by having $40,000 worth of credit card debt, working in psychology and realizing, this ain't it. I'm going to have to learn about finances, and thankfully getting myself out of that. But we so often forget that these people that we idolize or put on a stool are actually just like us. They've just had more time in the market, Osher. They've had more time in the game, and they've had the ability to fail and fail again. Like, one of my favorite things about my favorite successful business people, and I interviewed a lot of them for the book. I did a money diary or a business diary every chapter because I was like, you need to know these people. But my favorite, I guess, character trait across all of them is grit. They fail, they get back up, they dust themselves off, they try again. They're not the type of people that get offside and go, well, business isn't for me. Like, it doesn't take the smartest, it doesn't take the prettiest, it takes the grittiest. And I think for me, that has always been the thing that I resonate with, because I go, okay, cool. Like, I can see so many more people. There's always more to be done, places to be, people to see. But I actually am here to create a lifestyle. I burnt myself out a couple of years ago after creating a business that was way too big for me to run, have a life, have kids, do a podcast, all of that. Decided to throw that in. And at the moment, I'm working towards having a business that sustains the lifestyle I have, is really kind to the people that function in my business. I don't want to be the biggest. I do want to be the best, but I don't want to be the biggest. I don't want to be the most financially, successful person in the entire world. But I do want to have my lifestyle. And I think by going back to my values, going back to, well, what am I trying to create? Like, reading the Business Bible could be becoming the next Mia Freedman. Or it could be getting a little side hustle that puts some extra cash in your pocket each and every week so that you can have a family holiday every year. Like, financial freedom means so many different things to so many different people. And I respect every single option. Like, you can have a side hustle, or you could be, Naomi Simpson. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, is that what you want? Because it's so easy to get off track.
We talked about the slippery slope of credit card debt, and it can really sneak up on you. Earlier on, we discussed the interest and how once it builds upon itself, it can get away from you pretty fast. It can get away from you pretty fast. You can't be what you can't see, and it's nice to know that you're not alone. Tell me the role when you discovered that credit card debt, found out where you were, found out how far in the hole you were. Did you feel shame? Was it helpful? What was the thing that got you to take a step towards not being in that debt?
Well, Osher, I lied through my teeth to everyone I ever knew about that. Like, I wasn't in debt. Absolutely not. And I had the worst type of debt. I had a credit card and a personal loan. I just went real hard, real fast. And I just thought that to keep up, I guess, with the Kardashians, I needed a new car. I really wanted to study overseas. Like, I wanted a, really nice wardrobe. And I got that. And at the start, it didn't worry me. And then I realized how much it was impacting my life to have $883 going out of my account each and every single month on somebody's salary who I was earning like $60,000 a year. Like, that was basically all of my disposable income. I couldn't save, I couldn't invest. I was, telling my friends I was fine. I was just really busy. I definitely couldn't go out for dinner or lunch or breakfast or whatever it was. And I felt so much shame. I couldn't sleep well. I couldn't eat well. I was stressed. Like, financial stress is like no other. Like, it impacts your physical, mental, spiritual health. It impacts every single other part of your life. And so I decided to try and get myself out of it. Again, I didn't tell anybody. I was just doing this on my own and started to learn what I needed to do and how I needed to do it. And as I started to feel more and more empowered, I was like, everybody needs to know how to do this. Surely I'm not the only one. Like,
You're right.
People started talking about their debt and I was like, oh my God, why is she telling people about her credit card debt? Ew. And then I'm like, oh, me too. And I felt so much lighter. I felt like it's not just me. Like, I'm not on my own here. And I guess that's where She's on the Money started to snowball and was born. And it's a community of people who are just down to earth and we just want what's best for each other. Like, there's no shame in debt. In fact, the only thing having credit card debt or debt in general means is you spent more than you earned. That is it. Let's work from there.
What was the first kind of step that you took that gave you that release of dopamine and gave you the feeling of, well, it's not $45,000 or $40,000 of credit back in there to sort me out, but it is a little bit closer. I don't feel so underwater.
When I got my tax return, when I got my first tax return while I was in debt and I just started like trying to smash off as much as possible and I was really struggling. And I think I got like $1,200 back or something. And I felt like such an adult because I didn't spend any of that on the stuff that I would usually spend my tax return on. Because to me, that was like free money, right? Like I would just, if it's tax return money, it doesn't exist, right? You can spend it on anything. But I spent that whole amount. I put it towards my debt and I worked out how much that would actually take off the time it would take for me to invest. And I realized, hold on, if I can do that, then next year or the year after or whenever I get myself out of debt, that amount of money could be invested or that amount of money could be saved and I could be like rich. And so from there, it kind of just started to snowball and I realized that financial freedom was not just like some catchy thing. It's so nice to know that if you're just walking down the street and you have some cash in your back pocket, you have freedom of choice. And I think for me, that was the defining feature. Like, I can get out of this situation if I don't want to be in it, Osha. I can get an Uber home. I could call a friend. I could do whatever I need to do because I have the cash to back it. And so many times in my early 20s, I didn't have choice. I was doing things because that was the only option available to me. And I want better for people. I want you to have opportunity and choice. And I think we talk about financial freedom so often that you think maybe it's having millions invested. But for so many people, it's like having $100 to the side that if you spent it in an emergency, like you are not worse off. It's having, an emergency fund. So if far out Rego crept up and that's so expensive and why do I forget every single year about Rego? You had the cash in the bank. Do you know how good it feels to not have to put that on credit card or dip into your holiday savings or dip into something that you didn't plan for? Like, to me, that's financial freedom. So we want that today because we are at our core, Osha, about instant gratification, but we want to really understand this concept of long-term gratification so that we can create that for ourselves forever.
I've found in recent times, now bear in mind, I do not ask ChatGPT for financial advice. I want to be very, very clear about that.
I've tried it before.
Yeah, not a great idea. As someone who really struggled with maths in school, and as I mentioned before, if it's not big pictures and shapes and arrows, I don't quite get it. I have found though, if I use, an online spreadsheet, Google or Office or whatever, I can ask for a spreadsheet formula. I started doing this when I was doing these live shows around the news show or whatever I'm doing. Like, I'm trying to figure out how much I'm paying everybody and how many tickets I need to sell. I don't know how to do any of that, but I just type in like, what's my break-even number, and it'll spit it out, whack it in the cell. Oh my God, there you go. So now what you're saying is like, hang on, if I'm paying this much per month for this, I need a formula, and you literally just use language. Like, I need a formula to figure out if I'm paying $883 a month into this after, this many years, how much money, if it was in a savings account earning 3%, would I not be making? And it'll give you the formula, copy, paste, bang, you put the number in, boom. Like, that's you making a decision there and then.
And how much time would it cut off if I added an extra $20 a week? And that is where the power starts getting really sexy.
Yes.
You're like, oh, damn, girl, like, is that real?
Having been in a number of relationships, long-term ones in my life, this one's still together, but there's two very significant ones that didn't stay together. And that not only has emotional impact, it has financial impact. When it comes to, getting serious about someone, at what point do you need to have the financial conversation, do you think?
Yeah, so I need you to have that financial conversation with yourself while you're single. I need you to have that before you get into a relationship. Like, what are your financial goals? Right. Before you meet someone and their opinions start, guiding yours. It's cool if they do. Like, before I met my husband, Osher, I was like, property? I don't want that. I don't need property. I'm too good for this. I've learned about the share market. That's where I want all of my money. And then I met my husband, who's very wholesome, and he's like, oh, I'd love a family home for my kids. Sorry, what? That's not aligned to my values, but it was nice to be able to talk that through. So I think have that conversation with yourself at the start so that you know, where is your money? What does that look like? I don't want to be too dramatic, but Osher, we both know that not every relationship works out perfectly. How would you get out of a relationship? I would love to think that every single person is in a relationship that they could leave at a whim. They could leave so easily, but we choose to stay, right? I don't want someone who's in a relationship with me or in a relationship at all that's tied down because, money's a bit tight. I probably shouldn't leave this year because we've got X, Y, and Z and we can't afford it. Like, that's no way to live. People deserve better. So I think having these financial conversations, they're going to start from the very beginning. Who's paying the bill, Osher? What does that look like? Do you feel comfortable with the way that they are approaching cash from the start? Do you need to tell them what you earn? Absolutely not. But as things start to get serious, we don't have to ask deep, hard questions. We don't have to be like, what do you earn? What's in your superannuation? I mean, that was probably on my laundry list of a first date because that's just who I am. But we want to start with money story questions. Are your parents still together? What did that look like? Is mum and dad, are they in different financial situations? How do you feel about money? How did you grow up around money? If I say rich, what do you first think of? I want you to have conversational topics to talk about when it comes to cash, not necessarily these deep, hard-hitting, how much money should you have if I'm purchasing a house to contribute towards the deposit? We should have already had these conversations just about cash and how they grew up and how you grew up and how that differs. Because do you know how handy it is to know why your partner is being so stingy, or how handy it is to know why your partner just seems to throw money at everything and not in line with their values that they say they hold? If they're saying, I want to buy property, I love this, but they're spending all of their money in sports bet, babes, we need to talk. And it's not because you have an issue. Maybe you do. It's because you're saying you have one value and you're not living that value set. So I think it's so important to just have these consistent conversations that ultimately put you in a better position.
It's right up there with how, I don't know how you relate to your exes, for example, or how you think about, disciplining your children. It's so important that you are aligned. It's not to say that, as you mentioned earlier, you were not interested in the conversation you're having with your husband, but you were able to come to an agreement upon, home. Okay, yeah, I wasn't going to, but yeah, I get that. And it's really, really important. It's really important because as much as you're, what's happening inside your underpants is screaming at you to hit go, wait a second.
Yeah, what does that look like? But that's why I want you to do it, Osher, when you are single. I want you to set yourself up before you meet that person.
I'm not going to be single again. I'm just going to put that on the record here, Victoria.
We've all been there. No, but also I want people listening to put themselves in the best possible position.
Yes.
Because otherwise, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Yeah.
Use the time that you're single to learn about yourself. Yeah. Learn what are your values? What do you really care about?
Yeah.
It's such a good period of time. I wish I had used it that.
It's up there with when you're by yourself, then you don't have to do it in front of anybody else. It's like stepping on the scale or really actually writing out a food diary, an honest one, and really going, well, no, I actually did eat an entire bucket of ice cream on Friday.
What do you mean packets of Tim Tams aren't single serve?
Yeah, you're able to, like when you look at your screen time on your phone and go, I spent 4 hours today doing what?
Oh, that's me every day. I don't even want to talk about it at this point.
Yeah, that's really tough. But it is that time where you can actually have a long, hard look at yourself and understand, is this going where I want it to go? And put a time scale on it, as you were describing. If you put a year, 5, 10, 20 years on it, a great thing. We just got solar put on the house. It's freaking incredible. As part of the quote that our electrician gave us, she sent it over, and it's something bonkers. It's something like 90 grand over 25 years that I will not be giving to an energy company. It's so easy to see how, oh, no, I'll just pay the power bill, it'll be fine. But over the course of the time that we've got it there, 90 grand, that is a university degree for one of my kids. Like that. It's a no-brainer. Why would I give that money to an energy company where I could keep it within my family and use that wealth to forward the lives of the people that I care about, rather than the pockets of a shareholder? No, thank you. It blew my mind. Putting timescales on things is really, really, really cool. What was it that made you want to write this book, particularly around business and, skewed towards women starting their own kind of passion project that then can possibly, hopefully turn into either a side hustle or a full-time gig?
I think that there is such shame in our industry and just in general about people having side hustles. Like, how many times do you hear someone be like, oh, it's just like a small business on the side? And then the next question someone asks them is like, oh, when are you taking it full time? Like, we don't need to take things full time for them to be legitimate and act legitimately and be set up properly. I think so many times we are just trying to live our best life, and we're also only seeing the highlights reel. Like, even I am guilty of that. And you know why? Because I'm only whipping my phone out when I'm not crying. Like, I'm not creating content when I feel like trash, So I think that there's always this highlights reel online of all of these business owners and what that might look like. And I think it's about breaking that down, but also hopefully empowering people to know that it's not that hard if you want to do it yourself. Here are the steps. This is what I would do. This is, these are the mistakes I've made. These are mistakes my friends have made. This is what my friends have done that has really been amazing. And I think that it's just, business can be for you. And I think so many times we go, yeah, but I'm not that smart. Or, my business is not that different. Like, Osher, you might go, I really want to, and I always use this example of, I really want to start a candle business, but it's such a saturated market. So many people won't do it because of that. But more often than not, people are buying from your business because of you, because of the value you put in, because of how you show up and what you do. And just because it's a saturated market doesn't mean you can't be successful. It goes back to that grit. You don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the prettiest candle in the shop, but you have to have some level of value and understanding. And I think that that's where my book kind of comes in, because I'm not just talking about becoming the next, Naomi Simpson. It's about using business to your advantage to create the life you deserve.
The name of this show, I mean, I like things that do what they say on the box. She's on the money. It does what it says on the box. I like it.
Yeah, I would like to think I'm on the money.
Yeah, this show's called Better Than Yesterday because it's a way of living my life. How do you do that, if you do it all? How do you try to make today a little bit better than you did yesterday?
I think honesty. Like, you've got to be honest with yourself. Today can't be better than yesterday if you aren't, being honest with yourself about what you're doing and how you're feeling and what that looks like. I think for me, you've heard it a couple of times in this interview, and I talk about it all the time. It's about that grit. Like, if something is getting me down, I can sit in it. That's fine. I can have a little bit of a cry. Like, writing this book, that was a bit of a cry time, but like, I'll get up the next day, I'll dust myself off, and I will try and do more than I did yesterday. I think having burnt myself out in my mid-20s, literally, like shingles, hospitalizations, all of that stuff, I learned a lot about how that wasn't serving me and what I needed to change. And you can't be dramatic. It's not sustainable. Like, if you create steps that are far too big, you can't climb up them. But small steps in the right direction are still steps. And it's what I talk about in my She's on the Money community all the time, right? Like, if you start small and you start strong, you can create this epic investment portfolio. But if you are waiting to become wealthy, or you're waiting for your next pay rise, or you're waiting for the next opportunity to come knocking, it just might not come. And so I think it's always about this. Small steps in the right direction are still steps, even if they are tiny, because you will be better than yesterday if you are taking them in the right direction.
I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Thanks for writing this book. I'm grateful that my kids grow up in a world where this kind of information's out there and isn't so kept secret by a bunch of dudes who all went to the same school.
Oh, they all did go to the same school, didn't they?
Have the best time ever. Have the best Christmas with your little one. That'll be so
You
rad.
too.
It's the best. It's the best
I
thing
am
ever.
very excited about it.
I'm excited for you.
I am very excited about it.
You know why I'm so excited is because your kid's pretty little yet. You get all of Bluey to experience for the first time. I would love to go back in time
Wait.
and have not seen Bluey ever. Like, I've watched every episode probably 40 times.
I've never seen an episode of Bluey.
It is the greatest
I have been
sitcom
waiting.
ever written in Australia. It is unbelievable. It is such an incredible
I
cultural
love this.
export.
If I've learned anything from this podcast, it's I have Bluey. And that is going to make tomorrow better than yesterday.
Yeah, and it also will make you a better parent. Made me a better parent.
I hope so.
Oh,
I'm working on it.
Joe Brum's a freaking
And I don't want to
genius,
buy the
dude.
expensive parenting books, Osha.
No, we spent all the money on the snoo. Thanks heaps for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.